What's going on, gang, and welcome back to another episode of Scared of Normal. I'm Mike Murphy, and today I'm joined by my co-host, 𝙎𝘾𝘼𝙍𝙀𝘿 Murphy, and we're going to be talking about something that can sometimes be a difficult topic to talk about, and that topic is failure. And, you know, it's kind of interesting how we've all experienced failure, but it's such a difficult thing for us to talk about and accept and move forward from. And, you know, failure is a pretty simple thing as it's defined, right? Like, failure is really just defined as a lack of success. And then while that definition is insanely clear, we don't give failure all the credit it deserves. Failure really does offer us so much opportunity to better ourselves and grow. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah. The title of this episode is called Failure is Not Fatal. And I love that because I think so often we view failure as something that feels like it is fatal, that it is like the thing that's going to kill our dream, or it's the thing that's not going to allow us to push forward. And it really is actually the thing that can propel you towards an even bigger goal that you maybe never even knew you had.
Yeah, 100%. And I want to finish off the rest of the quote there. You know, failure is not fatal, but success is also not final. And that's, personally, it's one of my favorite quotes. In fact, I got it tattooed. I have it tattooed across my chest. I got that almost 10 years ago now, I think about. So it's kind of crazy to think about. It's a Winston Churchill quote. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts. And I don't know. That one's always just really stuck with me for what it is, you know, because like, to me, it's you can fail as many times as you want, and that is not going to end you. And same thing with success. Like, you can be the most successful person on earth, but that doesn't mean that it is going to remain that way all the time, right?
Right, which is a hard thing because I think oftentimes we think that once we reach that pivotal point of success, or we reach that goal, that it's just always going to be there. It's always going to like stay there, or that's going to be the thing that makes you feel the most happiness. And it isn't. And it can be taken away very quickly. And if we don't
Especially if you live in that space.
Yeah.
You know, if you live in the place of, I am successful, I have succeeded, that's probably going to be short-lived. I sent you a video the other day, and this video it's very illustrative of success and failure. And it's a guy, he has basically, if you can picture, a set of stairs next to a trampoline, right? He's like walking up a couple of the stairs, then he falls off onto the trampoline and bounces back up, maybe a couple stairs higher, a couple stairs lower, working his way to the top. And he finally gets to the top after kind of doing this bouncing routine back and forth. And he's like on the very top step, but he just keeps falling off. And then he'll jump and dance around up there for a little bit, then he'll fall back off and land back up there, and maybe a stair lower. And like, I couldn't help but share it because I was just like, wow, this literally is like a visual explanation of, you know, the yin and yang of success and failure.
Yeah, you can't have one without the other. And that video was so like impactful to me, just being able to see a visual representation of what this looks like, and that it's a spread amount of time that is going on. Like, you're pushing for something, you might get to a certain point in your journey, and then something happens and you fall right back down. And it was this guy just constantly going up and going down and going up and going down, and he made it to the top step, and then he fell all the way back down to the bottom step. And it was like this constant dance of failure and success.
And I think, you know, one thing that when I was watching that video that really came to mind, and we've talked about this on previous episodes, was he continued to build momentum. So he fell from that very top step and hit the trampoline, and he only bounced like 2 or 3 feet. And mind you, that the steps were probably 10, 15 feet off the ground. So he was bouncing on his back and kind of running up the side of these steps. And with each kind of bounce, he was gaining more momentum. But never once did he stop flat on his back, because if he did, he would have had to start back on the first step.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I thought that was a pretty cool way, the way he illustrated it. And if you're watching this podcast on YouTube, I'll go ahead and put the little video over this, or over the video you're watching here, just so you can kind of see what we're explaining. But yeah, it was cool to see him like maintaining momentum through failure. And I think kind of the big thing with this episode is that we'd like to really more or less rebrand what failure is, or what you think failure is.
Yeah.
Because we've it's been built into us for so long that we expect that if you fail, that you are a failure.
Right. We have a hard time like detaching our actions and the results of our actions from our own identity. And we've talked about that before on some of our podcasts, but having, the skill to detach what it is that you're doing or what you're producing from the value that you hold with yourself is huge. So let's rebrand failure.
Let's rebrand failure. Yeah. So, I mean, I think starting off the conversation of rebranding failure with a quote from Thomas Edison is really great. And he said famously, "I have not failed 10,000 times. I have successfully found 10,000 ways that will not work." And the only way that you find 10,000 ways that will not work is by accepting that you've failed. Mm-hmm. And I think that is a big reason that we all fear failure so much, is because that it's really hard to accept that we've failed. And I think a lot of that is just kind of from, the society or the cultural norms that we've grown up with, is that, when you're in school and you fail a test and you go home and like you're chastised for that and you're in trouble and your teachers are mad at you, or, whatever it is along those lines. If you're playing a game and you fail, then you've lost.
Right.
And there's no coming back from that.
Right.
Yeah, it's really hard to like kind of break out of those things and say like, okay, like, if you would have been taught when you were younger, hey, you failed this test, but if you would have done these things and it would have been taught to you that way, as opposed to like you feeling like you are a failure because you failed one test, that you're never going to pass that class. If we would have been guided through, hey, this is how next time you can avoid that. And like, just because you lost the battle doesn't mean you lost the war kind of mindset, right?
Right. It's just kind of like a reframing. And I love that quote because I do feel like that is exactly the quote that like can reframe your brain around failure. A failure doesn't mean that that's the end all be all. It just means that that's not the way that it's going to work this time.
Yeah. You figured out a way it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful. And when it comes down to that place and accepting that you figured out a way it doesn't work, then you become much better at navigating the path and figuring out how to make it work, and making it work more beneficially and usually in a faster, better manner. So, when it comes down to it, failure is such an important part of the path to success. And just on a more basic level, like our growth as humans. Mm-hmm. So why does it have such a negative connotation? I think that's the big question that we have to ask ourselves. Like, why do you feel like failure is bad to you? I try and ask myself that a lot. And like, the answer is different for all of us, right? So once you identify the answer, why you feel like failure is so bad, I feel like you can kind of start moving forward and saying like, oh, failure isn't as bad. In fact, it's really good for me.
Yeah, it's getting down to the root of like, what is it that makes you feel that failure is bad? Like, what was that thing maybe as you were growing up, or that experience that you had? I liked your example of like school. I failed so many classes in school. I failed biology in college so many times. Yeah. It was not my thing. And yeah, I think it really does come down to those little pieces of just what our everyday looked like as we were growing up that could have brought us into this idea that failure's a bad thing or it's a negative thing. But I think that once we can get to that root and we can find like, oh, you know what, actually failing a class doesn't mean that I'm a horrible person, or doesn't mean that I'm not smart. It just means that maybe my brain doesn't work in that way, or my brain needs to work a different way to be able to pass this. And yeah, that was definitely a failure that I worked through and I passed biology eventually. But yeah, I think we need to start reframing this idea of failure as it's not a bad thing. It's actually a really incredible and really good thing to get comfortable with.
Yeah, it's something, we should really like, at the end of the day, it should be our best friend.
Yeah.
We should embrace failure every day, and we should be striving to fail every day.
I think just as much as we strive for success, we should be striving for failure. And I think those things go hand in hand so beautifully, because you're not going to find the success, or you're not going to feel the weight of your successes if you haven't experienced the failures that go along with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And understanding that failure, I think, comes along with every step of growth, right? Like we were saying at the very beginning of this episode, like in that illustrative video, like the guy was at the very top of the world and he still failed.
Yeah.
You know, and I think, you know, again, that's another thing, like the world we live in, we're taught to believe like if you work super hard and you get to the place that you want to be, that life is going to be beautiful and you're going to be happy and you're not going to fail. Well, it's a little bullshit if I'm being completely honest. Like there is nobody that is successful that doesn't fail.
Right.
And fail on a daily basis. Those people have gotten so comfortable with failure that, yeah, they probably make failure look pretty easily, you know, or pretty simple.
Right.
Like,
I mean, think of like the Elon Musks of the world. Like how many times have they had to fail at, you know, these giant projects that they're going after? Like, I mean, I'm even thinking these quotes that we pulled, like Thomas Edison, Albert Einstein, like they're scientists. And so when I think about this, like I am kind of thinking in like a scientist mindset of like, they have to try so many things over and over and over and over, and they're exploding things and they're breaking things. And then eventually they like have this incredible product, but then they want more than that. They want to figure out the next thing, and it's just continuing. They're going back through it.
Yeah. And I think, you know, that's another good thing to kind of reconcile or keep in mind. Like as you become more successful or as you grow, your failures may get bigger, and they probably will get bigger, but you'll be more versed in, you know, fixing those things or being comfortable with that failure. So like, you know, your reference, like think about Elon Musk's failures, like your failure versus Elon Musk's failure, like say it's a monetary failure. Like when you fail, maybe you lose $500, $1,000. That dude is losing millions, if not billions of dollars, right? Like it's really in the same wheelhouse, like based on where he's at in life, you know. It's not to say that for you it's any less bad than when he fails.
Right.
But, you know, he's probably just
gotten more
really good
with
at it. Yeah.
I think it's a cool way to look at it too, as we're like talking about reframing failure and thinking about the failures getting bigger, but it's also like the more success you're getting, you're probably gaining a bigger platform too. And you, as somebody who can embrace failure, can teach like a whole new generation or a whole new audience of people what failure can look like and how we can move forward from failure and embrace failure. So I think that that's another cool aspect of that. The more success you have, the bigger platform you have, and the bigger audience you have to reach and to change, you know, some mindsets around it.
Share the failure with people.
Yeah.
And I think too, you know, kind of in that same vein, if you are trying to do something new, right? Like if you're venturing out to do something new, the failures are going to be more gray and concentrated at the beginning because you're learning something new. And if you're not failing, then like, are you really learning that much new stuff? Like, are you really challenging yourself that much? Because, you know, obviously as you get more comfortable and well-versed in a situation, in a job, in a business, as an athlete, like your failures do become less or they become different. But as you're getting into something, like you should be aiming to fail like often.
Yeah.
You know, like set out to like figure out again, like what doesn't work? Why doesn't it work? Okay, how can I not do that again? And how can I try the next thing? Does that not work? Great, move on to the next thing. You know?
I used to be a first and second grade teacher, and that was something that I would see and witness a lot, but then also that I would teach my students that like we embrace the fact that this is hard. We're learning something new. You've never seen this before. You've never tried this before. You're probably not going to get it right this first time, and that's okay. And we're going to celebrate you along the way because every time you try, you're getting closer and closer to being able to read a book or doing a math problem or whatever it is. And then they can bring that through anything in life. So,
well, and I always, you know, I think on these episodes before, I've gone into it before, but like I go back to like when we were learning how to walk, right? Like think about how many times you had to fail before you could walk. An absurd amount.
So many times.
Like
you're falling the whole time.
Like, and I'd be lying if I didn't say that I still fall down today sometimes. I lose my balance, you know. I'm not that great at walking sometimes. But like, you know, we were so young, we forget, you know, how many times we failed to do something that we're pretty great at today.
Yeah.
We still mess up, we still fall down, but like you're pretty good at it. Yeah. And it's apply that same thing to other aspects of life, you know. You want that new promotion? Cool, like don't just go ask for the promotion. do things to grow. And with that, you're going to fail, accept the failure, and move forward. Because, you know, I was actually having this conversation with someone earlier today, and we were talking about like having a job, right? And I remember like, you know, going to my boss and wanting a raise, and they said no, and I never understood why until now that I own my own business, that it's like, oh, it's because I wasn't bringing any more value in their eyes. And I probably wasn't bringing more value because I wasn't bringing new ideas or innovation to the table to say, hey, this is how we can drive the business forward. And it's not going to just benefit me, but it's going to benefit the entire company. And I just wasn't familiar with failure enough, I don't think, to say like, okay, I'm going to make some mistakes. I'm going to dive into these processes, and where can I find the weak points to drive this business forward? You know, and if I look at that in hindsight, I'm like, wow, I could have been a wealthy man, because I could have gone to these people and been like, pay me more because I found these weak points and this is how we can do better. And I'm going to continue down this path of failure, you know, success through failure.
I think that's a really great example too of learning to embrace the process as well. Like, you know, where you started versus where you want to be when you ask for that raise.
Yep.
Like there's going to be so many hurdles that you're jumping through, or things that you're learning, or, you know, ideas that you're bringing to the table that maybe are accepted or maybe aren't, but enjoying the process and learning to enjoy the process of getting from point A to point B, and then from point B to point C, and all the way through the alphabet. The process is, I think, where we grow, and the process is also where we fail. So,
yeah. And sometimes like you'll run into a place where there is no process, especially if you are innovating, if you're starting something new, if you're starting your own business, like you're going to have to create those things. And like the only way that processes are created is by documenting them. And you're not going to be able to document anything unless you can admit to failure.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. Like I think about it, like with my, you know, BMX career, I'm like, okay, like I had to hit the ground to learn what not to do. And I always like joke around with people and say like, I love business because like when I fail, I don't break bones. When you fail on a BMX bike, like you're bleeding and you're bloody and you're broken sitting there on the ground, right?
Yeah.
But that's the only way to learn how to do the trick is like, you know, I literally cannot think of a trick that I learned, you know, between the time I started riding until I was like 20 that I like just did like first try.
Right.
The amount of falling that I had to do to figure that out was astronomical.
Yeah.
And, you know, in other aspects of life, whether it be business or, you know, at a job or whatever that is, like we have that on our side where we're not like the worst case scenarios that we're going to lose money. And, you know, as hard as it is to believe, like you can just go make more money tomorrow. Like there's tons of jobs out there hiring. So like that is like, you shouldn't be scared to fail and lose a little bit of money.
Right.
You know?
Well, I think even we have some notes here on the parallel between failure and also like working out, and like you're saying with bikes, and you break your bones if you're failing, or you know, same thing with like when we work out and we push our muscles to a point of like exhaustion or where they start to fail, and
like you're cramping up, you know?
Cramping. And I actually had an experience this morning at the gym. Well, actually, I guess it was my last time I was at the gym yesterday. I tried to lift a heavier weight than I have been able to do before, and I couldn't do it. And I tried, and I got like maybe 2 reps in, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. My muscles gave out. They failed on me. And so I tried. I got 2 reps in, and then I put those weights down, and I went back to the pounds that I am normally able to do. And then this morning I tried again, and I was able to do it for 10 reps.
There you go.
So it was like just that idea of like, okay, let me try this and see how far I can get. Oh, it didn't work. I failed. My muscles gave out. Okay, let me go back to like my starting point, and then I'll try again another day. Tried again and was able to go a little bit further than I was the last time. And I think that applies to so many things that we're trying in business, in life, in sports, in creativity, and art, all of it. So
yeah, I mean, that's where the growth comes in, right? Like you have to step back from being so comfortable of being in the place of doing what you're doing all the time. We can get really good at those things. And then if you choose not to progress, if you choose not to fail, then you stop growing and you get stuck at that place.
Yeah.
And that could be, whatever in life. Like it's easy to get comfortable at what we've gotten good at.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's really hard to push past that because we are scared of failure.
Or it hurts.
And like, yeah, but like that pain is indicative of, an impending
growth.
Failure. Like if you feel pain, like you feel like you might fail, right?
Yeah.
And like, then you're going to miss out on that growth because you're getting to that point, you feel that pain and you're like, oh no, if this could go one of two ways right now, I could either do it or I could fail.
Yeah.
Do I want to fail? And the answer should be, fuck yeah, I want to fail. How can I fail really good today so I can figure out how to do it better tomorrow? Or how can I fail today so I can figure out how to put in the work to where I don't fail tomorrow or in a week or in a month or whatever that time frame is? Because just because you failed today doesn't mean that you're going to pick the pieces up and be successful tomorrow. Sometimes it is a week, a month, a year before you can, try again and successfully push through, because you have to put in the correct amount of work to get to that next threshold. Maybe you have to fail another 30 times. I don't know.
And I think along with that, like sometimes we underestimate the amount of time or the amount of effort it's going to take for us to reach that new level of whatever it is. And so we get into something, we get into, trying to reach a specific goal, and we think, okay, it's going to take me this amount of time, this amount of effort, and then I'm going to get there. And when I put in that amount of time and I put that amount of effort in and I don't get to that next goal, then it is that feeling of like, oh my gosh, well, I failed. Yeah. I didn't reach it in the time that I thought I was going to. And that can be really paralyzing if we're not reframing the way that we think about failure and thinking of it as, okay, well, actually, I just misguided or I miscalculated how much time or effort it was going to take me to get to that next level. Yep. And I have to rework this. It's the same thing as that quote of, I didn't fail 1,000 times. I, successfully found how many ways it wasn't going to work. Yep. So same thing with this new level of success.
And I think that kind of leads us into like overcoming failure, right? Like you can only overcome failure once you've accepted that you failed.
Yeah.
And there's no harm in accepting failure. However, there is harm in denying failure. Because when you sit there and say, I didn't fail, you kind of work yourself into a hole, right? And you look at all the reasons why you didn't fail. And that's a slippery slope. And failures can be daunting and frustrating, but you just have to think about how you can or not think about how you can push through, but just remember or accept that you have failed. Okay. Learn from that. Don't do that same exact thing again, because is it Einstein who said it? He's like,
Einstein.
Yeah. If you do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result, that is the definition of insanity. So once you've failed, learn from that and say, I'm not going to do that again. Accept that. Write it down if you need to. If you're working on a specific project, I'll say maybe you're working on a marketing campaign for your business and it completely failed. I really like process and defining the process as I'm going through things so I can look back on things and say, okay, this didn't work because this. Maybe the image was wrong. Maybe the text was wrong. But if you're not documenting those things, if you don't have process to reference, then you're going to think the whole thing was a failure. But maybe it's just this little thing that needs a tweak. You know what I mean? And you can't, unless you're documenting process, whether that is, being an athlete or in business or your 9-to-5 job, whatever it is, if you're not documenting the things that you're doing on a daily basis to achieve success, you can't know where you're seeing failure because you're going to think everything's a failure.
Right. That actually reminds me of another, I don't even know if it's a quote, but just kind of this idea that I've heard floating around through a different podcast, that sometimes it's it really is just that one little thing or that one little roadblock that needs to be pulled aside. Maybe I'm looking at this project and I'm doing this marketing campaign one way, I'm doing it only through social media or whatever. And maybe that's not working for me. And so I have to just like tweak it, and maybe I am doing it through email marketing or something different. Like it's not the actual content that was a failure, or it's not the campaign that was a failure. Maybe it was just this one small little piece of it. And when we can identify those failures, like you're saying, and we can tweak whatever it is that wasn't working for us, it opens up this like whole new like
just opportunity, right?
Yeah.
Well, because it's like if you can identify the failure, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes the failure is, like you're saying, it's a small niche of the overall product.
Mm-hmm.
So you can say, okay, let's just tweak that thing a little bit.
Yeah, it's just a
and
slight pivot.
now you are changing the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And if that fails, then note it.
Yeah.
And then try it again by changing that variable again. But if you're trying to change all the variables,
then
you're going to
know.
continue to probably see failure because you're just starting from scratch. And I think that that's another thing that we have to be aware of with failure is like, you might think by when you fail by starting something entirely new that you're going to succeed, but you're more than likely just going to run into the same problems with that because you're going to have to learn how not to do it before you learn how to do it very well.
Right.
Right. And like, each new task or project or job comes with a new set of failures.
Mm-hmm.
They might kind of mirror each other, but 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a unique set of failures that come along with that task. So, really sink into whatever the task is at hand and say like, okay, I'm going to exhaust my options here before I say, well, this isn't working and move on to the next thing. But you have to be able to say, I have something to reference. So, again, I'll just revert back to that marketing campaign thing. Like for me, like I love project management software. So I'll like before I even start working on it, I'll map it out in the project management software and I'll make notes and I'll do all the things and I'll mark things complete as I'm going through. And, sometimes it feels pretty redundant, but if I miss something or whatever, if I fail in a certain area, then I can reference back to that. So, and I think that can apply to so many aspects of life. Maybe it's not project management software, but maybe you're taking notes or just mental notes or whatever it is. But yeah, you have to have some sort of recipe to follow and to tweak when it comes to failure, I believe.
I think you're 100% right. And you're really good at that. I'm learning to get better at it, but
like, again, I mean, it goes back to the failure, right?
Yeah.
Like, I have been doing like the world of business and entrepreneurship for, probably 8 or 9 years longer than you have. So that comes back to like, I have failed a lot more. So like you're getting your feet wet and you're figuring it out and you're getting better at it.
And I'm learning that if you don't have a process or you don't have something to refer back to, you don't have that system in place, that is a failure point for me.
Yeah.
And that's something that I'm growing in. And so I didn't have those systems in some of my areas of business previously. And now I'm learning that those are systems that I have to put in place. And I'm getting to learn and grow through that. So
heck yeah. Yeah. And I think, this kind of just like encapsulates like the whole thing of like failure doesn't make you a failure.
No.
Like I love that because like failing is an action. It's not a character trait.
Yeah.
Like you can't actually, you're not a failure.
It's a verb.
You just fail,
Fail is a verb.
So, and I think that that's like a really great thing. And like, again, I'll just go right back to it. Like if you're not failing, you will never see success. Like I just don't know anybody that has ever been or seen success without an absurd amount of failure. And again, like I think it's pounded into our head that look at this guy, he's an overnight success. Well, we're not privy to all the failure.
Right.
It's not pretty. Nobody likes to share that. And I think that we can all do a better job of telling people that we're failing,
telling the story, letting people
being
in on the
honest.
process.
And I've tried to be a little bit better about that in my own life. Like when people are like, hey, how are things going? Like, here are my wins. But I'm also seeing some losses because they may have failed in the same way. And hey, try this, And I think that kind of goes back to previous episodes that we've talked about as well, as like surrounding yourself with the right people. Because if you talk to the right people about the failure that you're experiencing, chances are they have seen something similar or they have some great advice for you to kind of navigate that. And that kind of expedites the, you don't have to fail as much because somebody can give you some good advice. And I'm not going to say that you're never going to fail, because that's just not the case. But people can help you with, averting from more failure than you need to experience.
Which I think is also like a very interesting idea, because when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable enough to open up about our failures to other people, it's almost like, I don't know, it's almost like that's like, I don't want to say it's a failure in itself, but it can be viewed as like, as just as difficult as failing, right? Like, oh my gosh, I'm going to open up and I'm going to tell this person that I failed at this thing. But every time that I've ever done that, or I'm sure you in your same experience, like, it just opens up this new level of friendship and this new level of like community. And you do gain so much more out of being honest and putting your vulnerabilities out there and letting people know that you're not perfect. You didn't reach this level of success. You didn't start this business. You didn't do this thing without coming to all of these like stop signs of just like, oh, nope, that's not going to work. You got to like try something else. And
I think that's a beautiful way to say it, because it is so relatable. You know, like we can all relate on failure because we've all failed. We've all seen success, but I can guarantee you we've all can share failure more than we can share success, right?
Yeah.
Like, because we have all failed. We've all failed way more than we've succeeded. Certainly we have. So being able to share that with people and let them know that like, hey, I'm just as human as you, because we're all the same, we all fail and succeed in the same manner.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's reframe that, and like let's talk about the things that are hard for us, or the mistakes that we're making, because the only way that we can really fail is when we give up.
Yeah.
The
only way that, anything stops or failure is an actual failure is if we really stop pushing towards our dreams.
Especially
like,
when it's like, don't get me wrong. There sometimes is a time and a place to say like, all right, yeah, this might just not work. But like, you have to exhaust your options, right? Like you have to run through the motions, and like, unless you've failed countless amounts of times and you've changed your angle and your approach and you've done all the things like that and you've documented it and you've looked at all the different angles, until then I wouldn't give up, and like there's sometimes there's a noble place to back away from something, but I would say 9 times out of 10, like, you don't need to give up because you're just looking at it from the wrong point of view.
Right. And it's also like, I don't know if you guys have ever seen that visual. We maybe have even talked about it before too, of like the miner underground, and he's like digging in a mine for diamonds, and like he's like one like whack away from like this huge diamond pile, but he decides to turn around and stop, and he walks away from it. And so that to me kind of encompasses this idea of like the only way that we fail is if we stop. Obviously, outside of what you're saying with like the nobility of like sometimes things aren't meant for us and we do have to walk away. But there's so much to be had on the other side of failure. And I think that if we can just continue to get comfortable with it, and even in that visual, like, how many times did he have to hit that hammer? He failed because he didn't find the diamond. He failed because he didn't find the diamonds. And it was constant, over and over and over and over. And it was maybe just that one more try or that one more like whack at it that would have given him the biggest success.
Even in that, it's just like call and help.
Yeah.
Get your friends there to come help you. Get somebody to stoke you up. Like, I know for myself, like when I'm in here roasting coffee or whatever, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to be doing this, I'll call a friend and they'll come in here and we'll watch bike videos and we're having fun. And like that continues to motivate me, right?
Yeah.
So like, don't be scared to ask for help.
Right.
Don't be scared to ask for support. Like, because it is very easy when you're kind of going at certain things. Sometimes you feel like you're alone, right? So like call in for help, whether that is at your job or again, being an athlete, or when you're an entrepreneur. You can feel very lonely in any field that you're in. So don't be scared to ask for help. You're not failing by asking for help. In fact, you're just, exhausting one of those failure points, right?
Yeah.
Like you're going to say, cool, I know what I need to do next time. Cool. How can I move forward? Easy.
And I think that's a beautiful thing about failure, and kind of the point that we keep coming back to is that you can really build some super strong relationships and friendships and community through embracing failure with other people. Yeah.
I think, as we're moving into wrapping this up, I kind of want to keep this one short. But I want everybody to just really think about how you can celebrate failures. Like obviously celebrating wins is easy, but celebrate failures too, because you're not going to have those wins without the failures.
Yeah.
You know, and I know it's hard to be like, dang, I'm down in the dumps right now. I just failed. I lost some money or something's broken or whatever it is. But again, celebrate that, because you know when you pick it up tomorrow, you know what not to do, right? You know how to move forward in a beautiful fashion that isn't what you just did. And you can take that with you into so many other experiences in life.
I'm even thinking, like, as you were saying that, I think, like, if you're somebody who journals, I think sometimes, like, we will only journal about the highlights, right? Or even, I mean, think about anything, like think about social media or any platform that you're putting like your ideas and your words out into the universe somewhere. Like we're only putting out like the best things. We're only putting out the successes. We're only writing down the wins. But what if we like stepped back and we wrote down all of the failures? What if every time something didn't happen the way that we thought it would, we wrote it down, and then we had that thing to come back to to say, whoa, like look at all of these failures. But then I'm celebrating those, because the next time I, get to celebrate a win, I get to write that down and I get to see like, oh my gosh, I failed 10 times or I failed 20 times. And then I had this success. Like how cool, how much growth has happened from here to there. So yeah, I think that's a cool way to celebrate failure as well.
Yeah, it's a good thing to be aware of, and like, in reality, like we grow more from failure than we do from success. In fact, success is such like an egoic, emotion. When we're successful, we're high up on our horse and we're excited and we're beating our chests and we're so excited for ourselves.
Yeah.
But when we're failing, we don't want anybody to see that, right? So if we can kind of flip that script and say, cool, how can I be just as excited when I fail? Because this is a thing that's indicative of my growth. I think it's good to be aware of that. And I think it's time that we all like, take failure back and make it something better, own it, and we grow from it. Like I think it's important for us all to do that. And that's how we grow as a community. That's how we grow as humans, like whatever it is, like we got to fail to move forward. It's what's the saying, like 1 step forward, 10 step back. Yeah. Like it's so true, because really like that's sometimes the path to success is like you can be successful. And again, I'll go back to that video we were talking about at the beginning of this, the guy falling off the steps. Like sometimes he went 10 steps up and he fell down and he ended back up on the second one. Sometimes he fell off the second one and back up on the 11th one. Like it's a yin and a yang. It's a back and forth of how that works. It's a yo-yo effect, if you will. So
right. I always think if I'm not feeling, then I'm not growing. And if I'm not growing, then I'm not seeing successes. So I like what you said with, I think it's time for us to take back failure, give it a new name, redefine it, revision it for ourselves, and take it into a place that's going to allow us to grow and reach our own successes.
For sure. And just, with that in mind, like, just remember, every failure is an opportunity to adapt and change the way that we do things so that, the following result is better, whatever that might be for you. So, yeah, I think that's about all we've got for this one. This one was super fun. And yeah, just kind of, don't want to say a last minute thing, but it's something that we watched that video yesterday and I was like, we should talk a little bit about failure. Because again, we experience a lot of that, and, every single day, I think I fail countless amounts of times. So yeah, it's a fun thing to talk about. I hope you guys enjoyed this one.
And I hope you're encouraged to celebrate failure.
There you go. Yeah. So with that in mind, how have you failed today? Have you failed? If not, get out there, go fail so you can succeed. We'll catch you guys on the next one, and keep being scared of normal.